Hello everyone, my name is Stefan and I am the creator of this Elvish/Elven City in Forest Environment pack. Today I'm here with Lierte Studios and we are just going to be talking a little bit about the environment, what you get with the project when you buy it, how the project works, etc, etc, etc. So, first off, we can start off by purchasing the environment from Cosmos, and make sure you do so quickly before the launch sale ends. I already did this, so I'm just going to hop straight into the project and I'm going to show you guys what we get when we open up the project. So first of all, we're going to be met with a bunch of different assets that you can get, and all the assets are divided into certain categories. For example, we have the exterior construction category, which basically is just all the assets related to building the exterior of any elven house you feel like building. Next up, we have interior construction as well, which is about all the interior assets that you can use for your elven house that you feel like building. We have different kinds of walls, different kinds of floors, and we have different materials for each floor. We have vaulted ceilings, stairways, and spiral staircases, etc, etc, etc. Moving on, we then also have terrain assets. This will be anything that you will feel like you need to use to build any kind of terrain environment that you want. Especially for people like myself who don't like using the landscape tool, you will have every different kind of rock and terrain asset you can possibly need in order to build any landscape you feel like building. Then we also have some foliage to enhance those terrains. These foliage help incredibly well with getting that realistic feel, especially when you have a good lighting setup and you can use the pine trees to properly cast shadows wherever they need to be casted. And we have on top of that more rock assets in order to paint some foliage, and that also goes even deeper into some grass assets and some ferns and bushes, etc, etc, etc. And then moving on again, we also just have a vista for the background shots. And then we also have some waterfall meshes in order for you to build any kind of waterfall you feel like building, or if you feel like creating a fountain, you have some fountain spurts as well. And then we also have the props section. This one is the most densely packed category that we have. We have everything from bed assets to marketplace stalls, wardrobes, cutlery and kitchen props, rugs, carpets, more marketplace assets, and then most importantly, the drapes. You can never have enough drapes. And then on top of all of that, we have some lovely blueprint assemblies. These are all to streamline the process of building your environment or your elvish house. You can have stuff like environment assemblies, like here I have a riverbank mega assembly in order for you to build a riverbank of your choice if you don't want to go and painstakingly place every rock that you want to place. We have a pre-assembled waterfall for you as well, and then vaulted ceiling assemblies with interiors and exteriors, and we have different kinds of facades. You can't see it right now because it's all in the way, but all of these assemblies have different balconies and different facades, and all of them can be used to streamline your process of environment assembly. And on top of that, we have an assembly for every single structure that we see in the main render. And we also have furniture assemblies so that you can streamline your interior decorating or furnishing process. We have pre-assembled beds and pre-assembled living room arrangements and banquet tables and dining hall tables, including study nooks, chess-set tables, bookshelves, wardrobes, whatever your heart feel like wanting. And then on the technical side, we have both a lumen ready environment and a ray traced ready environment. This environment is for people who do not want to use ray tracing. Unfortunately, the ray trace version cannot just have your lumen, your ray trace features disabled in order to work for lumen, because this one uses an entirely different lighting setup than the lumen environment. So your shadows and lighting results will differ if you just switch off ray tracing from this one, and it will not look like this, which is why we built a separate level for you if you want to utilize lumen features only. So, moving on, let us open up the environment and see what we get when we hop straight into it. So when you open up the environment for the first time, you will be greeted with the main level, which is the ray tracing level. However, when you open it, you're going to see that this does not look anything like the render that we are promised in the showcasing. Like here. Like, where is this result? So don't worry, You will be able to get this very easily by just going into project settings, going to the ray tracing features, and all you have to do is just tick these two boxes and you will get the same results that we have in the showcase render. In general, when you have your project settings open, please make sure that you have all these boxes ticked before you continue with the level, if you feel like wanting to use ray tracing. If you feel like using the lumen level, all you have to do is just go into open level, and right over here you will find Elven Forest City lumen no RTX. When you open up that one, it will take you to the lumen settings. I will pause this while it loads. And here we are greeted with the lumen version of the environment. However, you will see it looks a little bit too dark, and that is because we are still using ray trace settings. So let's just go ahead now and disable every single ray trace setting that we have. Untick all of these boxes. It'll look a little bit overblown now, but now all we need to do is just restart. And now our lumen level will yield the proper results. The only thing you'll see is that it looks like a lot of the shadows are missing. So all you need to do is just do a quick fly through to get all those shadows to pop in. And then once you're finished with your fly through and you go back to the start of the level, you will see that now all the shadows are loaded and the environment looks proper again. The differences between the lumen level and the ray tracing version is basically just the shadows, as of course you can never get the same kind of quality of shadows with ray tracing that you can with lumen that you can get from ray tracing, but that is expected because that is after all what ray tracing does. When it comes to the ray tracing level, however, it uses a completely different lighting setup, and because of that lighting setup, lumen will not be able to work with that lighting setup. So on top of just the shadows being different, the entire setup of the lumen scene is different with ray tracing. However, if you activate ray tracing on this level, it will still look okay, but if you deactivate ray tracing on the ray tracing level, it will give very broken results, as you saw when you opened up the environment. Now, let's talk a little bit about that lighting setup that I was talking about that makes everything look so weird. So, the flow that or the approach that I followed with this is a different kind of approach where you use an HDRI map instead of anything else and your standard skylight, and you increase the HDRI values to incredibly high values. Like here we see the intensity is at 6000, and if you go into the skylight of the HDRI component, you will see the skylight is around 2000 lumens. The reason for this is so that we can get a very diffused effect on our plants. So if I go into some of the more overcast or shadowed areas and you look at these grass blades, you will see that they have a very diffused roughness setting, and unfortunately this kind of roughness effect cannot be achieved with just standard roughness settings. You have to utilize the HDRI overexposure values and then decrease the exposure through the post-processing volume in order to get the exposure down but still utilize this very diffused roughness map effect. This is in order to achieve that very natural wetness that a lot of grass or leaf assets have in real life. Now, of course, as we also see with the shadows, because it's ray tracing, we have the nanite shadows popping up. So in order to fix that, we go and we do the standard r.raytracing.shadows. And if you just move down here, you will see enable two-sided geometry. We say space, add a 0, and then that fixes the nanite shadows. And then on top of that, we also see that we are a little bit over budget with our texture streaming pool. So let's fix that by using the streaming.pool command. There at the top we get the first result, and I have 24 gigabytes, so I'm going to say 24,000, and now that error has disappeared. And now we have our render ready scene, the same result that we get with this environment render that we have on the showcase render for the product. So what else can we talk about? Let me show you around a little bit first, and then we will get to the rest. So by the start of the level, you will start around this area, and as I said, we have a bunch of different structures. On the structure that we see, this is the library that I built for us to use. If you go inside the library, you'll see it's just a standard library, and it is very fun and very cozy. And we are greeted with this wonderful spiral staircase and very moody lighting. And if we go up the staircase, we see another second floor with these scroll shelves, which was very fun to build. Unfortunately, I didn't build this out of engine, I built this inside the engine, so this is an assembly of a bunch of planks that came together, and then I just dropped that in there. But it works, and I think it has a very nice effect. And then going down, we go back outside. And then on the left side, we have our first elven house. This was a very fun little guy to build as well, especially with the amount of foliage that I could use to decorate it around. And as we go up, we will be greeted by some stairs, and we go in, and we are once again greeted with another lovely, cozy little setting, and a very aesthetic sideboard assembly on the right. Moving through, we have another spiral staircase, and on top of the spiral staircase, we have our first bed, with a very nice, cozy, poofy blanket. And a breakfast nook on the side for the happy couple if they want to have breakfast on their balcony before they go outside for the morning. Going down the staircase again, we are greeted with the dining room with a little dining table setup, and as we go outside we see a little hidden staircase. I have placed a lot of these staircases all around the environment because I love hiding them and making or allowing users to find them or discover them the way you would discover secrets in any environment. As we go down, we are greeted by this little boat, and we can go either to the left, which will take you around the environment, or around the first house and bring you back to the start of the environment. And if you go back, after you see that you have now come to the bridge, you can go back in, you can go back to the boat, and when you go to the boat, you will see that naturally you'll be able to go forward, and you'll be greeted by this little gazebo thing that I placed down here. And on the left you will have a waterfall, and on right below you will get the little mooring section. And as you go up here, you will see that you have a very little aesthetic place for that one shot in Lord of the Rings if you place a bridge here. Hehehehe. You know what shot I'm talking about. After the gazebo, you can go up, and then you see this wonderful little stairway, this little natural staircase with a lot of foliage and a lot of very beautiful scenery to take in. And as you get to the top, you can either go to your right or you can go to your left. On your right, you will see that you are back at the library with the tower to show it there. You can go forwards on this little bridge in order to get to the dining hall, or you can go to this side, which is a little tunnel thing that you can explore. So let's go down here and see what is at the bottom of this little secret tunnel. And it brings you out to this little outdoor dining section with some live music and a refill station. And going forward, we get greeted by this little pathway, and as we go up the pathway, we will see, first of all, some beautiful scenery and some very nice background shots, especially with the spiral staircase on the trees, a very typical staple of elves. And we will see the palace on our right, a little tower in the distance, and on the left we will see that we have now come towards the dining hall. And if we go into the dining hall, we are of course greeted by the large amount of dining tables. To the left we have a kitchen space, and further down we have a VIP section for dining tables, and on top we have another little VIP dining section. And as we go outside, to the left we will see that we are back at the library, and to our right we can now see that we have more selections or directions for paths that we want to go to. We can either go to the left to that tower, or we can go forwards to the palace. So let's go forwards to the palace, and as we walk forwards to the palace, we will see that we are now at the top of the waterfall with the gazebo down there. And if you want some close-up shots of the waterfall, this is what the waterfall looks like up close, and this is the kind of effect you can get with those meshes that I showed you earlier in the asset lineups. They can give very, very nice results if you use your lighting system correctly. So up the stairs we go to the palace. And as we go to the palace, we can go into the doors, and we are greeted with this beautiful vaulted ceiling entrance with chandeliers and lights hanging all around, some seating areas towards the left and the right with some shelves and books to keep you busy. When you go up the stairs, you will get greeted with a little study section or a little hangout section, and as you go around here you will find a staircase and another staircase, and as you go up you will find a little lounging area for whoever lives in this palace to use. And here is a little breakfast nook right by the balcony with the drapes overlooking the wonderful environment in front of you, and you can see the vistas in the distance that I talked about earlier at the asset lineup. And as you go back, you'll see that there is another staircase, so let's go up this staircase as well. And as you go up here, you will be greeted by the wonderful, magnificent royal bed for what I would assume is the lord of this city to nap in. Imagine taking a nap in this bed. And then you have a little a little sideboard set up there, and a little seating area over here. And it is all very cozy and very, very homey. So let's go back down again, and as you go down this staircase again, and this is where you will find the second staircase, which will take you down, and in here there's another little eating area with some curtains and an entrance taking you outside, and a closed off entrance on this side. We're using the drapes to hide it. And as you go forward, you'll find a little counseling section or a council meeting section. You can of course imagine which scene I'm talking about right here. And going forwards, we will see another little breakfast nookie, and then we discover another little staircase that can take you down. And here we have another little hidden section built into the mountain, and going down and down and down, we will then be greeted by this little platform out here. There's a lovely little open space here for you to decide whatever you want to build in here. And if you go in here, there is a little secret space back there that I decided not to decorate and not to advertise, but inside there's another little space that you can do with whatever you want. And we see another little stairway, but we see a stairway going up here as well, so let's go up here and see what is here. And we discover that we are now back at the entrance of the palace. So let's go back down, and we see this stairway takes us down into the docks. And as we go towards the docks here, we get greeted by this lovely little stairway as well, which takes us to another elven house. And if you look up, you will see the beautiful palace in the distance. And here we have one of the shots from the render. And here we will meet another boat that can take us on anywhere on the water we want to go. But let's go over here. Let's go back up to this cross section that we were at earlier. And now we are back here we want to be, and now we can take a look at what is over here by the tower. And as we walk over this bridge, we will see the waterfall beneath us and the gazebo on the other side over there. So let's go up and walk through this little pathway. I imagine they have weddings here, or ceremonies. And then we are greeted by this little, almost like a shrine spot, and in this spot we kind of get a view of the entire map laid out before us and how the entire flow works. And yes, that is the entire structure of the map. One thing I forgot though is if you go back to the start of the environment, there is a little section that breaks off onto your right. So if you go through this little section, you will be greeted by a cozy little marketplace that, in lore purposes, is for travelers who come from all across the world to set up a little stall here, and they get to sell their goodies and trinkets from all around the world, which is why we have cheeses and meats and a bunch of different styles, not adhering to Elvish architecture at all. And there are a lot of winding paths and connecting sections, so you will never reach a dead end. You can go up here for a meat section, you can go down here for another spice section, and here is a little spot for people to sit and eat and listen to, once again, more live music. Towards the back we have a little bakery section for bread, some flowers and fruits, a cutlery stall, and a little bookshelf or bookstore for anyone who wants to buy a bookshelf. It was a lot of fun creating these little stalls, and each one of them are using individual pieces. None of these are assembled or pre-assembled. They were all built in scene into the environment. And here we have a little tool stall for tools and gardening tools, etc., etc. And over here is a wine section for if you want to buy exotic wines. And then here is what I imagine where the manager or overseer of the marketplace would be chilling at, and here is a little lounge for him to have his business meetings. Let's talk a little bit about the materials and the way the materials work. If I was to go and use any of these exterior construction materials, for example the walls, you will see that they are using the RGB mask setup that I have built for my materials. So let's go to one of the more visible sections of the walls, and let's make sure I have selected the correct one. Great. And now we can see what kind of effect the materials will have on the walls. These are all driven through masks and channels that I have enabled for all the materials. And then apart from RGB masks, I also have just standard material setups for standard textures and stuff like that. We have things like your contrast settings or brightness settings and roughness strength. If you look very carefully, you can see the effect the roughness has. To explain the foliage, I need to use a clean level, because the foliage, unfortunately, needs to use two different versions. You have a lumen version and a non-lumen version. So if we drop in some pine trees, you will see that they look pretty okay with the default lighting in the ray trace version. However, if you go and switch off the ray tracing and use only lumen, you'll find a lot of overblown saturation and subsurface scattering effects in your lumen version, and that is because the materials have been set up to work differently for lumen and for ray tracing. So if you go into your settings here, your three biggest settings that you will need to change is your subsurface intensity back and front, which are these two, and your albedo luminosity. This is to get the overall brightness or darkness of your leaves, and then the subsurface settings will be how much sun comes through on the edges of your leaves. So depending on whether you are using a ray trace version or a lumen version of your project, these three settings are the three biggest settings you will need to use. One other thing I forgot to talk about is the differences in emission and subsurface strength in assets from the main scene and assets from the content library. All the emissive and subsurface assets in the main scene are using duplicates of the original materials, and these duplicates have extremely high brightness values. Any material that is set up like that has the suffix bright added to them at the end. This is so that you can know which ones have been duplicated and has been increased to a very high intensity. Like here we see emission strength at 3000, and this is so that they can work for the main scene environment, which uses the extremely high HDRI values with the skylight settings at 2000 and then rebalanced through the post-process volume to bring the exposure down. Because of these settings and because of the way this is set up, if you were to use this same lamppost, but you are using the original asset, you will see that the original asset does not have the same emission intensity, and that is because the original asset uses the original light material, which is different than the bright material. Any asset in this scene that utilizes an emission value has a duplicate of the material assigned to them. If I were to go in and open up a new level again, and we drag and drop that same lamp into the level, you will see that now with the default lighting, the default material is perfectly adequate for the default lighting setup. But let's duplicate that and let's assign the very bright value emission to the light, and we will see that it is now overexposed. This is the one we see in the main scene, and this is the one that works for default scenes. And this applies to any other asset that uses emission, like the lamp rings, the stringed light, and all foliage assets as well, which is why I talked about the foliage as well, because for the main scene, the foliage asset's subsurface scattering had to be increased tenfold in order to match the subsurface scattering of the main level. I made pre-assembled blueprints of all the main stuff we see in the levels. So for instance, we can have the Elvish house already in here, pre-assembled for you with all the walls and assets and the floors and everything, just the way we saw it in the main scene. You can have it unfurnished or you can have it furnished. Wonderful. And now we see also, because we are in the default lighting setup, all the original assets have their own original default materials on them, and they are working perfectly fine with the default scene.